listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for spending some time with us today. If you haven't been to GiveGod90.com lately, I suggest you do that. Usually I start out saying, hit the like buttons, hit the share buttons, all that good stuff. We were watching something last night on YouTube, and it was live, and they were saying, if you don't hit the share buttons, we're going to explode and all that kind of stuff. Well, we don't explode. We just like it when you go out there and like what we do, so it makes it easier for people to find us. If you don't want to miss anything, don't be afraid of the notifications. It's twice a week. It's not, we don't bombard you like some people do. So don't forget that. I do remind everybody at the beginning about the books, Tradition to Truth, God's Universe, God's Rules, and Inheriting Lies. They're out there. A lot of you have been reading those, and we appreciate that. I had some really good feedback from a lot of people. Was there anything else that I usually talk about at the beginning?
You are being supervised today.
I am being supervised today. Yes, I am. Closely monitored. We have some folks outside doing some work for us that I refuse to do because they're trimming some trees. They've gotten into some power lines, and I don't play with high voltage electric. It's just not something I do. I refuse.
Not safe.
You got to know your limitations, right? And I know mine, and electric, and I don't mind messing with electric. In fact, I'd rather do electric than plumbing, but high power lines is something I avoid as often as possible. No, too many people have gotten hurt from them. Something that a lot of us hear, and some of us have maybe even said this: If God is so loving and so powerful, why does he allow people to suffer? If he loves us so much, why do we go through the misery that we go through? Well, the suffering of mankind was brought into our world because Satan hates mankind. That's about as plain and simple as I can put it. The hatred caused that divine being, known as Satan, or whatever you want to call him. He'd already become proud, and he'd already lusted after power. But it caused him to use the words that were spoken to Adam to trick Eve into sin. And now Paul writes that all creation suffers because of that. Our Creator chooses to allow evil. Here's something you never probably thought of. He allows evil to teach us. And it teaches us that only through obedience to his instructions will we truly find the peace and joy that he desires for us. When we reject his perfect instruction, we suffer because we bring about our own suffering. We're designed to have peace and joy only when we follow the Creator's perfect instructions. When we choose to follow our own way, and when we selfishly choose to place ourselves above all else, well, the effect it has on our spirit and on our physical body causes negative consequences. Some of those negative consequences may be more severe than others, but the result is still the same. When we bow down to idols, or we begin to follow one of the many unholy spirits, and regular listeners will know this can lead to what we think of as demonic possession. Go back and listen to some of the messages on spirits and that kind of thing if you really want to get the gist of it, because what I'm going to talk about today takes more time than I have to recount that. Addiction is one of the many unholy spirits that is way too familiar in the world today. Now, we often think of addiction in the venue of drugs or alcohol. And if you know anyone who is addicted to these substances, you've probably noticed a negative effect it's had on their body as well as on their spirit and on their mind. Right? I mean, you can see it. A friend of ours had a family member just the other day that overdosed and died as a result of addiction. Theft is something we're instructed not to do. Taking something from another without compensation is an unholy act. People who steal from others for their own personal gain care only for themselves, and the act of self-gratification left unchecked or unpunished, right, it negatively affects the individual more so spiritually and physically. Stealing can become addictive, right? The thrill of taking something without getting caught often leads to taking things of greater value. We often don't think of plagiarism as theft, but it is. Plagiarism is stealing someone else's work or someone else's ideas. And it often leads to more, nefarious acts. Joe Biden, our current president of the United States, was caught plagiarizing a paper while he was in law school. Yep. That's what kept him out of the presidential race several years ago. He dropped out because people looked at him and said, you're guilty of theft. Well, what we've learned of his other unscrupulous activities displays what unholy spirits he chooses to follow. And if you listen to any of his ramblings, it's easy to understand he suffers physically as well. If you watch him walk, he doesn't. I know a lot of old folks. He doesn't walk like a typical old person. He walks as if he has physical abnormalities now. Adultery also has some very negative consequences, right? And depending on who you choose to commit adultery with, some of the immediate physical issues can begin with sexually transmitted diseases. Add that to the cost of divorce and the cost of your character, right? And we understand why it's forbidden. And depending on the spouse you may be married to, it may lead to your physical death because they will kill you. Mine would, without blinking an eye. Yeah, she is the reason dynamite comes in small packages. I say that semi-jokingly, but it's true. And we look at these things and we have to see a little bit of humor in it because it's, you bring it on yourself. It's self-inflicted. There is something we can do to very easily remedy many of these things. And it begins with repentance, right? Make the choice to stop following the unholy spirits and love the way your Creator has designed us to live, or live the way your Creator has designed us to live. The scars are still going to be there. And they are reminders that we messed up. We sinned. But as we try to live a more righteous lifestyle, those past sins will not be mentioned by our Creator ever again. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't experience temptation or that you're going to have an easy life. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Once you choose to live the way the Creator designed you to live, He may choose you to help defeat the enemy. Oh my, something we never thought of. Paul has this to write, if you want to read that passage.
For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12.
Okay. So, what's it mean? Well, let's break it down. We don't struggle so much with each other, even though sometimes it seems like it, right? Our struggle is with what is too often translated as principalities, authorities, something that has been given some kind of authority over us, either civil rulers such as heads of state or local leaders, but more often those divine beings that have chosen to rebel against the Creator. That's why in Psalm 82, the Creator tells us, or tells the divine beings, I should say, that they will face death just like mortals who reject Him. These unholy authorities choose darkness and death over light and life. They choose evil over good. These are the things we struggle against, even in ourselves. It's that simple. We fight temptation in ourselves all the time. Do I do this or do I do that? If you include the Almighty in your decision, chances are you're going to choose righteousness over evil. A child isn't born with the knowledge that it's wrong to steal or it's wrong to commit adultery. They have to be taught. A baby only knows it's hungry or it doesn't physically feel good, so they cry because they desire to have their needs satisfied. They need comfort. They need to find either something to eat, or we need to find a way to heal whatever ailment they might have, whether babies are noted for colic, right? I won't get into the biology of it all, but it all comes basically down to good parenting. And unfortunately, many parents who desire to be good are led astray by people who are ignorant of certain things. And I'll go back to the 1950s commercial, 4 out of 5 doctors smoke Camels. Well, now we know that smoking isn't very good for you. When, let's see, almost 60 years ago now, one of the substitutes wasn't the formula that many people are having trouble finding. It was like Caro syrup and milk. We know now that that's probably not a real good substitute, right?
Right.
So it's not that the parent wants to be bad. They just, are following bad information. Adults are the ones who are supposed to teach the children. But then again, when the adults don't know, they don't have the knowledge they need, well, it's kind of impossible for them to pass the information on to the child. As children grow up and they become parents, what do? Most of the time, they're going to do a lot of what their parents did for them. And where has that gotten us in the world today? But, thankfully, we have examples in the Bible that help us. We can read about the people who choose to be obedient to the Creator and the ones who reject His words. Because we struggle with the unholy spirits that we can't really see, we replace those things usually with someone in our life, someone that affects us negatively somehow. And here's something that you may not think about. The people that we replace those unholy spirits with, that we blame, are often struggling with unholy spirits as well. The person you might be having some issues with may be following some unholy spirit, or they, sadly, they might have just given up and followed that spirit because, it's just easier to do it this way. Everybody cheats on their income tax, right? Everybody takes something that doesn't belong to them. Well, not everybody chooses murder. Not everybody chooses adultery. Not everybody, you get what I'm saying, right? But some people do. They just give up because they think it's easier. One of the greatest examples we have in the Bible to defeat the enemy, defeat an unholy spirit, defeat, Satan himself, is Job. And Job was a very wealthy man. And he's described this way. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And this man was blameless and upright, fearing God and shunning evil. And somehow Job seemed to be the target of evil. But do you remember who suggested Job? You want to read that passage?
One day the Son of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. "Where have you come from?" said the Lord to Satan. "Oh, from roaming through the earth," he replied, "and walking back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one on earth like him, a man who is blameless and upright, who fears God and shuns evil." Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not pledged a hedge on every side around him and his household and all that he owns? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and strike all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." "Very well," said the Lord to Satan. "Everything he has is in your hands, but you must not lay a hand on the man himself." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Job 1, 6 through 12.
So, it was the Creator himself who chose Job. But why? If Job was so righteous, if Job was this upstanding person who cared for his family, cared for others, why in the world would the Almighty say, you just, here's Job, see what he'll do for you? Job obviously trusted his Creator. But equally important, and never forget this, the Creator trusted Job. Trusted him enough that he knew Satan would be defeated by Job. Now, I have said in the past, and I'll say it again, I don't know if I want the Almighty to put that much trust in me. It's that simple. But think of some of the things that you may have faced in your life. Have you faced evil and then been rewarded for it afterwards? Chances are you did. I did. I'm not going to go into details, but, knowing what I went through, knowing what I lost and what I have now, there's absolutely no way that could have been done on my own. The unholy spirits I faced were rebellion and rejection. I've looked into the eyes of darkness and deceit, lost just about everything, and started over from scratch. But I've been given back more than I ever hoped for, even though, I didn't realize what was happening at the time. I quite honestly thought I was suffering because of something I'd done. And part of it was self-inflicted. But I was being used to defeat the enemy. Now, I didn't lose near as much as Job did. but I had to start over. And basically what I started over with was a renewed faith. And I'm not saying this to brag. I'm not saying it to be anything more than an example that most of the time you may not be realizing what you're going through, or you may think that you're being punished for something, when what you're actually doing is being trusted to battle evil. So, if you're a regular listener, how much more ready are you now to face the enemy and declare victory? Hopefully you understand you're fighting a battle to defeat evil. The ammunition in your armory is knowledge. The knowledge that you are designed to follow the Creator's instructions, and by doing so, you can and will defeat the enemy. You don't battle against flesh and blood, even though it seems like it at the time. Now, sometimes, having said that, sometimes you may face an opponent that is flesh and blood when they have subjected themselves to evil. In other words, if it's someone who has just given up and felt it easier to follow an evil path than a righteous path, it may turn into what seems like a physical battle. But what you're actually fighting against is not the person, but the spirits that they follow, the unholy spirits that they follow. When that happens, and I wish I'd have known this years ago, when that happens, you need, and I needed, to stop and listen for the voice of the Creator and follow the instructions that He gives you even more closely. Think about the Maccabees. We hear about the Maccabean War. Well, if you read the accounts of the Maccabees, found in the Apocrypha, by the way, what did they do? Before every battle, after every battle, what did they do? They hit the dirt and prayed. They didn't offer the Creator advice. It's not like, God, we're going to go up on this ridge and we're going to come down screaming and yelling, and we trust you to, if you could just scatter the enemy for us. That's not the advice they gave him, okay? They would pray. And it's like, you tell us what to do and we'll do it. That was basically their prayer. And afterwards, what did they do? They didn't say, "Oh, what a good job we did." It was, "Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to defeat the enemy." So when you're chosen to battle evil, it might not look like Job. It might not look like the Maccabees. You might not even recognize it at the time. You might not even know what's going on. But if you remain faithful, if you listen for His voice, follow His guidance, you will defeat whatever enemy that you're being chosen to defeat. For some of us, that enemy may be addiction. For some, it may be overcoming gluttony, adultery, lust. Do I need to go down the whole list? I don't think so. I think you know what you're fighting. Because sometimes the battle you fight is inside. It's against yourself. But if you listen for the voice, if you follow the guidance, if you follow His instructions and live the way you're designed to live, you will be able to declare victory. I'm not sure how you might feel about that, because it took me a long time to realize what was going on. And I know other people who have had who have fought their own battles. And when they finally understood what they'd done, what they were able to accomplish, they realized they couldn't do it on their own either. It takes the guidance and the instruction of your Creator. And if you follow His guidance, if you follow His instructions, you can and will defeat enemies. Maybe, like Job, you can send Satan packing as well. So, until Thursday, we wish you many, many blessings and many, many victories.